No one is better at that than me, all right? So I say that to say I'm academically qualified to talk about this. And truth is truth regardless of the form it's in. And so my goal is to put some light humor around this and to give some science. So I'm gonna bring together theology, science, experience, stories, and hopefully we'll find ourselves in the middle of these things. Tonight's talk I owe to Solomon, Paul, a bit of Jesus, Peter Rollins, Emerson Eggerichs, who wrote the great book Love and Respect, the University of Washington, who did the biggest longitudinal marriage study ever done in the history of the world. They studied married couples over 35 years and divided them into masters and disasters, and then they published the results of what makes masters and what makes disasters. And so everything we're going to talk about tonight is somewhere in those 6 things. And so because marriage, relationships, they're complex. So if you're single, these are things that I think all single people should know. In my Let's Talk About Sex series out there, I spend an entire session talking about 40 must-ask questions before you get serious about somebody. And now most of you are past that because you're already serious about somebody. But there are questions that, for instance, for your children, that you would want them asking before they got serious about somebody, because marriage, relationships, they're complex. Marriage is so complex, the Bible can't even agree on what to say about it. This is why I get tickled when Christians go, I have a biblical view of marriage. Really? Do you? Which one, right? So what does the Bible say about marriage? Well, it depends on who you read. Like Solomon was really for it. Solomon says if you find a wife, you find a good thing, right? Paul was pretty against it. Paul said, he who marries does not sin, but he signed up for a life of pain. Now, who's right and who's wrong about that? Well, it depends on your experience. Actually, both can be right. What's the Bible say about marriage? Well, it depends. Solomon was like, marriage, let's do it. A lot. Paul was like, actually make it your last choice. Why? Because marriage is complex. Even if you marry somebody who's basically good-hearted and basically mentally healthy, it's still complex, and it's still hard, and it's still ridiculous, and it's still a blessing, and it's still complex, and it's still maybe the greatest blessing in your life, but it's still really complex and hard to navigate. Why? Because even if you marry a psychopath, what would you like me to do? I can't do anything with that, right? But even if you married somebody who's basically good-hearted and basically mentally healthy, marriage is still complicated just simply because of preference. Men and women just prefer different things. And I mean at the most base level, like smells. Women prefer sweet-smelling things. Candles, perfume, flowers. You buy a woman a bouquet of flowers, every woman in here is going to sniff it. You buy a man a bouquet of flowers, all he's going to smell is $70. That's what that costs, right? We don't care about that. You go to the biggest mall in Townsville, there is a candle shop. I'm talking about a shop that makes a profit doing nothing but selling wax. How's that possible? Women. Because women like sweets. But you go by there at 11 in the morning, you'll have 2 women in there sniffing wax, calling that fun, right? Now, you'll never see 2 men doing that. You'll never see 2 men sniffing wax, right? You'll never walk in there and there's 2 guys going, hey, Billy, check that out. That's that new white lilac scent. Man, that is something special. No way. No way. Why? Because men prefer stinky things. There's nothing funnier to a group of men than when something stinky happens. We think that's hilarious. Women find that disgusting. We're supposed to live together, but it's in our DNA. You're never going to change us. And this isn't just about bodily functions. This is about basic odor, right? Like if you're playing rugby, right? You're out and you're playing rugby and you're dirty, sweaty, muddy, nasty, you're gross, right? You have to get to a meeting, so you quickly shower. You take your dirty, sweaty, nasty, bloody clothes, you put them in a plastic bag, you tie it up, and you put it in the boot of your car. 3 months later, you're looking for something in the boot of the car, and you see that bag. Now, every man in this room knows what must happen. It's in our code. If there's a bag of known stinky things, you have to open it, and you have to sniff it. And every man is going to do that. Every single man. Here's the thing, right? You open, and here's the thing. If I've got 4 friends standing around, they all owe me a courtesy sniff of my known stinky thing. You will see men, grown men, pass around a bag of known stinky stuff and purposely sniff it. It goes like this. Oh, Billy, that's a good one right there. That's good. Oh, that's a good one. But here's the thing. If they smell my thing, then I owe them a courtesy sniff of their thing when their thing happens. This is why if you're ever stuck in traffic in Townsville and there's 4 guys in the same car and 3 of them have their head out the window and the 4th guy's in the back seat laughing, He just cashed in on his courtesy sniff. And for us, that's hilarious sort of stuff. Men and women, they're just different, even at the most base level of smells. Like even if you train a man, like it takes some training, but if you train a man when he's done working and he takes his dirty clothes off to put them in the dirty clothes hamper, right? Just take them off the floor. Don't leave it on the floor, man. Just put it in the dirty clothes hamper. Even if you train a man to do that, if you're watching him, if he knows you're watching him, he won't do this. But if he thinks he's alone, every man does this. If a man thinks he's alone, every single man will do this, right? Relax. The guy at the back's going, Shane, no, right? I am a professional, right? So what they'll do is they'll take their clothes off. And for whatever reason, men leave their socks to last. Because nothing is attractive as a naked man in his socks, right? And so he'll take his dirty socks off that he worked in all week, and it's involuntary. I don't even think we think about it. This is what we do. Before we drop it in, every man in this room will go, and they'll sniff it real quick. It's like we prove we work. And I promise you, if those socks don't smell bad enough, it'll go like this. I think I can get one more wear out of this right here. I can tell you right now, right? So men and women are just different. And here's the thing. I want to start with the words of a rabbi that are a bit irrelevant, actually, if we don't examine the language. So this is a rabbi named Paul, and he's writing a book called Ephesians. And he says this, if you could bring that slide up. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing of the water through the word, and to present her to herself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. And in the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. However, each one of you must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Interesting advice. Husbands love, wives respect. It's interesting that he doesn't say to both people, you both love and respect. No, he says, husbands love, wives respect. Why? Well, women find it natural to love. No man in here wonders if their wife loves him. They don't. I don't want to burst anybody's bubble here, but a woman's biggest fear is, I wonder if he still finds me attractive despite aging and changes. I can tell you not one man in this room is laying in bed wondering if you still find him attractive. Look at us. We've given up on that, quite frankly. Like no man in this room is laying in bed going, I wonder if she finds me, if she thinks I still got it going on. But women do. Women do. And so it's natural for women to love. Your husband's biggest fear is not whether you find him attractive or not. Your husband's biggest fear is whether you believe in him or not. He's wondering if you secretly think he's an idiot. He's wondering if you secretly are unhappy with the amount of money he makes. He's wondering if you noticed his best friend and the amount of money he now makes, and it's more than that guy makes. This is why, if you're out on a date at the nicest restaurant in Townsville, wherever that might be, Silks or whatever, Mama Songs or whatever, right? So if you're out at this nice restaurant, wherever that might be, right? And the prettiest woman in Townsville walks in, right? I'm talking about, right? Like, oh my God. She is the prettiest woman in Townsville. Who's going to notice first, the men or the women? The women. And they hate her, right? And she hasn't done anything. They don't even know her. They just hate her already, right? Now, if this beautiful woman walks by and the husband notices, if he's like, woo, yes, sir, get you some of that, right? Now, don't do that, right? Because if you do that, it's going to hurt the woman's feelings, right? Now, the reason men don't understand that is because we don't care if you notice the good-looking men. So if a good-looking man, I'm talking about the best-looking man in Townsville. Best-looking man in Townsville walks in. It's like, oh my goodness, like, did someone draw him? Like, what's going on? Like, he's like the underwear model. You can still see all 8 of his abs, and there's that V at the thing. Like, it's just something. It's just unbelievable. Well, if the woman notices that and goes, woo! Yes, sir. Get you some of that. Like, we don't care. We're like, whatever. Hey, sir, come over. Could you show her your abs? I'm like, it's like, get preheated. You're coming home with me. Whatever, right? So we don't care about that. But if a guy walks in that you both know and the wife says, hey, that's John. Did you hear about that? He's been promoted 3 times. He now makes twice as much money as you. I wish you were as successful as John. Well, if you've done that, it's a totally different thing. See, women find it natural to love, and men find it natural to respect. We just find it natural. Like men learn in second grade, if you act disrespectfully, it's a fist fight. So Paul would never tell a man, respect your wife. He doesn't need to. He would tell the man, love your wife, because men find love unnatural. Women find love natural, but they find respect unnatural. And this is why none of that matters. Even though it's in the Bible, doesn't matter. Here's why. Because words don't matter. How people picture words functioning matters. So if I was to say, guys, come on, we got to love our wives, that's a platitude. No one's going to go, no, we need less love. That doesn't matter. What matters is how people picture words functioning. And if I was to say, come on, ladies, we got to respect our husbands, right? No reasonable. Now, look, if you're a horrible person, you're probably in the wrong room, right? But assuming you're basically good-hearted and basically mentally healthy, every man in this room would want to love their wife. And every woman in this room would want to respect their husband. That's not the question. The question is, how do we picture those two words working? And this is where science helps us. So, the University of Washington did this long study about 6 behaviors that basically good-hearted, basically mentally healthy women will always interpret as love, and 6 behaviors that basically good-hearted, basically mentally healthy men will tend to interpret as respect. And then they publish their findings. And I happen to know it. And so what I'm gonna do tonight is walk through really quickly 3 of each of those with some basic ideas around both, and hopefully we can enhance our relationship. So first, let's talk about love for a second. So love, next slide, is a tension between 2 things, right? Next one. Love is not best seen as the function of the perfect, but rather a function of the celebration of the sublime. This was the whole point of the cartoon we just watched, right? The idea of love is never ever, I know what's perfect about them and I love that. Love is understanding what's imperfect about them and loving them anyway. This is a quote by Jacques Lacan. It's really, really profound. And so listen carefully to it. Love is giving somebody something you don't have and they don't want it. That's love. In other words, love is not naming your perfection and they accept that. Love is clearly naming what's wrong with you and they love you anyway. It's being fully known and fully accepted. Is that next slide okay? Perfect, yeah, there you go. And then, so the second tension is idol versus icon. That love is not the celebration of the idol. The idol works in attraction, but it doesn't work long term. The idol works with something called limerence. Every one of you who are married, you went through something called limerence. This is the initial attraction phase where you can't wait to get off work. You tend to text them all day and you can't wait to spend every second with them. Limerence is the involuntary rush of dopamine in somebody's brain. It makes you addicted to that person. This is why when you're first attracted to somebody, you can have 4-hour talks and it feels like 10 minutes. So you ask them, how's it going? It's like, oh, we talked for 4.5 hours the other night and it felt like 10 minutes. Now, once you're married 10 years, a 4-hour talk sounds like hell. But back then, it sounds awesome. Love is a function of idolatry is anytime you make an image of somebody you think will make you whole, and then you set that image up. That's not love. That's attraction, that's infatuation, but it doesn't work. And here's the reason why. No human being can bear the weight of the idol for too long. Like this is when you tell somebody, hey, you complete me. That's nice in attraction, but in a long-term thing, nobody can bear the weight of idol. Love is not a celebration of the idol. Love is best a celebration of the icon. The icon is not something you set up that you think will make you whole. The icon is something you acknowledge its flaws and all, and it draws you to explore deeper. Love is best a celebration of the icon, not the idol. It's best a celebration of the sublime, not the perfect. And it's best a celebration of the cause, not the destination. That all meaning is best interpreted through the process by which we get somewhere instead of the getting somewhere. In philosophy, it's called the lie of the sacred object. So if you want a new car, that's what you want. The object cause is the process by which you have to save and sacrifice to get the new car. And when you get the new car, all the meaning of the new car is not found in getting the new car. It's found in all the sacrifices we made to get the new car. Marriage is like that as well. Getting to where we think we want to go is not where all the meaning is. Actually celebrating all the bumps along the way is where all the meaning is. And actually, I don't even need to talk about this very long because that was the whole point of the cartoon we just watched, and the story told it well. Now, let's say it this way. Next slide. So with love, you cannot help but experience your world as meaningful. But also without love, you cannot help but experience your world as meaningless. Because God is not someone we love as much as someone we find in the act of love itself. Like we can have a lot of things, but without love, it's all meaningless. We're just Batman in the Batcave with all of our toys. But with love, we can have far less things and can't help but experience our world as meaningful. Even God. God is not, when people say, I just love God, I don't even know what people mean by that. God is not someone we love. God is someone we find when we love. And that is two different things. So let's say it this way. Next slide. Marriage is ultimately a dynamic, progressive revelation of who God is to the world around us. That ultimately our relationship should be a dynamic, progressive relationship of who God is to the world around us. Now, let's just do some real obvious things. Next slide, right? So one, the best way to motivate anyone is to meet their biggest need consistently and predictably. That's the best way to motivate any person, is to figure out what they need the most and then meet that consistently and predictably. If you want to do the opposite, you can control them by being purposely inconsistent. The best way to control anybody is to be intentionally inconsistent. It's actually Southeast Asian prison control techniques. If there's too many prisoners and not enough guards, if they're cruel all the time, they'll unite and come against them. If they're nice all the time, they'll unite and come against them. The way they control prison populations in overpopulated areas is they be purposely inconsistent. So they go nice, nice, cruel, 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 nice, cruel, nice, cruel, nice, nice, cruel, cruel, nice, nice, cruel, cruel. And what happens is the people lose their sense of self. The best way to motivate anyone is to meet their biggest need consistently and predictably. Next one. Number two, you never choose to meet your spouse's need because they deserve it. You choose to meet their need because they're worth it to you. Jesus said that love is like this. Look at flowers and look at birds. They do nothing to deserve it, but God feeds them and clothes them because they're worth it to him. How much more worth it you? In other words, when Jesus described the love of God, he said love is a function by which you treat someone as they are worth and never as they deserve. Nobody loves their wife because they deserve it. There'll be days they do. Other days, not so much. We love our wives because they're worth it to us. No one chooses to respect their husband because they deserve it. There will be days he does. There'll be days he'll amaze you with his superior intellect and problem-solving abilities. Other days he's going to be an idiot. That's just called life. We all love and respect, not because they deserve it, but because they're worth it. Let's say it this way. Number three, next one. You never motivate someone long-term by withholding or controlling their biggest need. We might win the battle, but we will lose the war in that game. It is always in our best interest to meet their need first. Number four, in general, a female's biggest need is to increase feelings of love in the house. That's in general. There are exceptions to that, but in general, a woman's biggest need is to increase feelings of love in the house. And next, in general, the male's biggest need is to increase feelings of respect in the house. A man feels disrespected, he shuts down, he isolates, and I'm assuming good-hearted and basically mentally healthy, we don't know how to deal with the disrespect. Same thing with women. Women don't know how to deal with decreased feelings of love. Here's the question. Go 2 slides forward. Is it okay for your spouse to have a different need than you? That's the question. Is it okay for our spouse to have a different need than us? And then is it okay for us to humble ourselves and meet that need consistently and predictably? I owe this to Emerson Eggerichs. He said this was really, really a smart thing, and I didn't come up with this next slide. He calls it the crazy cycle. The crazy cycle is, without love, she will always respond without respect. And without respect, he'll tend to respond without love. And without love, she'll tend to respond without respect. And without respect, he'll tend to respond without love. And around and round and round and round we go. And where we stop, no one really knows. But there's a better cycle, and that's the energizing cycle. The energizing cycle is, with love, she'll tend to respond with respect. And with respect, he'll tend to respond with love. Here's the question. When we're on the crazy cycle, somebody's got to act first to get it off of the, somebody's got to humble themselves. And whose job is that? Well, it's the one who's most mature, Whoever's the most mature will realize this is going nowhere, and being right about this is actually less important than getting the relationship back on the energizing cycle instead of the crazy cycle. All right, so let's go straight to the science here, all right? How does a good-hearted woman interpret feelings of love? Let's talk to the men. So this is for the men, and I'm just telling you, this is straight science. These are behaviors that good-hearted, basically mentally healthy women will tend to interpret as love. And I can tell you none of this is normal for us, okay? So one, consistently and predictably empathize with her. What the research shows is when you don't try to solve the problem, you simply acknowledge it, women think you love them. Now, that is, yeah, you would agree with that? Well, that's good because the science says that. It's pretty clear about it. And I can tell you, if I could speak for the men here for a second, you're going to have to give us some grace on that because I can tell you your man's biggest fear is you thinking they're a loser. And men feel like losers if we can't solve the problem. Like if Matt and I met Matt today, he's a great guy. If we sat at a bar and got a drink and said, look, Matt said, look, I got to run a problem by you. If he runs the problem by me and I give him 4 solutions to fix that problem, Matt is likely not going to look back at me and say, why are you always trying to fix me? Never. It's in our DNA to think we need to solve whatever's brought to us. And so when we don't do that, we're afraid that men are afraid that they'll be seen as losers. But here's the thing. What the research shows is that women actually interpret the empathy before the solution as love. And this is strange to us. So for the guys, we have to, by faith, take this as the truth and then act, right? Now, for you ladies, you might have to let us off the hook a little bit and say, I actually don't need you to fix this. I just want you to listen. What the research shows is that women need to report, recognize, and release their emotions. Men see communication as an exchange of information. This is obvious. Picture this. Like, let's say that you finally get to sit down on Friday night after a long week and you get to put on your favorite show to binge it until you're going to fall asleep, which evidently with you guys, one of y'all falls asleep pretty quickly. You were really quick with that shoe up. He is going to sleep first. And let's say you're sitting there, right? And the kids start screaming from the back of the house and everything in you is going, please God, no. Please God, stay back there. Please nobody call me. But before you know it, somebody says, Mom! I'm telling, right? And you're like, oh, God, right? So think about that. Think about the 2 different ways a man will walk into that situation versus a woman. If the dad goes back there, how does it go? Shut up! You tell me what happened. Right. You tell me that's how it goes. A woman doesn't do that. A woman walks in and says, what's going on in here? And all 3 kids talk at once. And she can do the whole thing at once. It's her strength. It's because her brain's a little bit more evolved than ours. That's the thing. And this is obvious, right? Because if you're ever in like a party and you're making small talk, right? Every man in the world has experienced this if he's been with a woman long enough. She can be 20 feet away and you're over here in another conversation and she's in her own conversation and you're talking to your friend about something and you can't remember the guy's name. You're like, what was that guy's name? What was that guy's name? And then from across the room, your wife says, his name was Bill. It was Bill. And you're thinking, how do you do that? The other part of that is every man in this room has experienced this where you're riding down the road and the Bluetooth's in your ear and somebody calls you and you're trying to solve a problem and then your wife picks that exact moment to remind you of all the things you need to tell the guy on the phone, right? And she's like, remember to tell him about Friday night and tell Nancy I said hello. And the words are going around in your head and everything in you wants to go, shut up! And the reason is we can't think about 2 things at one time. But because of the way our brains operate that way, what the science says is that women interpret empathy as love. So next slide. The men, do you need me to help you solve this or do you just want me to listen? To the women, what the science says is stick to the topic. Please, no spider webbing. Spider webbing is anytime you combine 3 or more stories into one narrative. We can't follow it. Next one. The second thing the science says is to consistently and predictably assure her that you treasure her above all else. Science says that women interpret being reminded that she matters as love. Now, again, men, this is an act of faith for us because we sort of know, well, if I didn't matter, you wouldn't be here, right? So, but women actually wonder about this, and this is where it gets really strange. What the science said, the science asked a follow-up question. How do you feel treasured? And here's what the women said. The women said that when you reminisce about an old memory, it makes them feel treasured, right? Now, again, this takes an act of faith for men to operate in, right? Right? Why? You will never, ever see this situation play itself out. Hey, Harry, do you remember what I was wearing the first time we met? Never. Never. Alan, do you remember what I was wearing the first time I preached here? No, you don't. I don't remember what you was wearing neither, man. But here's the thing, right? But when what the research shows is when you reminisce, when you go, hey, remember that night we went there? And you remember that? The research shows that women interpret that behavior as love. So the research, to summarize, says that women interpret empathy as love and reminiscing about I can tell you my grandmother died at 92 in an old folks home with Alzheimer's. But in her crate, she still had love notes that my grandfather sent her from World War II. Now, he wouldn't remember sending them, but she was not in her mind at all, but she could tell you about those things. And so what the research says is that if a guy can humble himself and take the risk and try to remember something, she'll interpret as love. But it also says that I can tell you, the women need to help us out and remove the fear and honor the fact that we're trying because it is not normal. We are terrified of getting a detail wrong because I can tell you, every woman in here remembers their first date with their husband. And you husbands, don't panic. We're not going to have a quiz show right now because the husbands don't, okay? And it's not because we don't love you. It's because we just don't remember all that crap. And here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. And once you remove the shame of the situation, shame plays an important part of why everybody in here is together. Because when you first got together, the other person was scared of not belonging to your world. Like, think about your first date with your husband. Knowing what you know now about him, did he smell like he smells now? No. Did he order the food he orders now? No. Did he do the things in the car that night that he does in the car tonight after the, no. Why? Because he was afraid of not belonging to your world. Think about the meal he ordered the first date you had. He probably ordered half a grilled chicken breast, a half an order of rice pilaf, and some broccoli. And even as it's coming out of his mouth, he's going, what am I doing? Now he's ordering 20 fried chicken wings, a large French fry, and a beer, right? And you're thinking, God, you're disgusting. Have you no shame? And he's like, nope, you're stuck with me now, for the rest of your life, right? And so for all of us, it's good for us to reminisce. And what the research says is that women interpret that as love. The last one for women is to consistently and predictably reconcile and resolve with her. In other words, do not be secretly angry. What the research showed is that men and women handle conflict differently. Women tend to bring conflict full circle. I have to look at this because I wrote it down because they resolve conflict by going full circle. Here's how it goes. Women have conflict, then they storm off, then they come back together, then they vent. Then they make apologies, they make jokes, they laugh and start over. That's how women handle conflict. This is how men handle conflict. They resolve conflict by letting it go. Here's how it works. Men have conflict, they storm off, then they cool off period. This is why you'll never see two men in conflict and one walks away and the other man goes, Harry, you get back right now and talk to me. Never. We just let them go, right? So they storm off, then there's a cool off period, and then they come back together and they drop it. And they have a drink and they watch the game together. So one handles conflict by going full circle. The other thinks if you go full circle, you got a problem. It's complicated. And what the research shows is that if we discipline ourselves to make sure that we don't go to bed angry, women interpret that as love. So the first three, to summarize, was women interpret empathy as love, like thinking, reminiscing about the past as love, and making sure we go full circle on conflict. Now let's talk about the men. All right, so the men are a bit simpler, right? I mean, men are a little bit simpler beings. Like, seriously, be nice, have sex, bring a sandwich, and we can make our own sandwich. So it's that, but they put some language. It's true. They put some language around respect that I think is really helpful. You have to go a couple slides forward. It'll say how to make a good-hearted man feel respected. Number one, consistently and predictably verbalize your honor for the responsibility to lead the home. This is really, really important. Assuming you married a basically good-hearted, basically mentally healthy man, he does not think he has the right to lead the home. So if your husband comes at you like, I have a right to lead this home, he's probably not basically good-hearted, basically mentally healthy, and he's probably wrong with his language. All good-hearted men do not feel the right to lead the home, but they feel the responsibility to. And that's different. To have a right to lead the home is different than I'm feeling the weight of the responsibility to lead the home. Let me illustrate this with something. All right, so let's say tonight it's, 11 o'clock, and you're watching one more episode of Everybody Loves Raymond in the bed as you're falling asleep, and you hear a loud noise, and you know there's an intruder in the house. Whose responsibility is it to go confront the intruder? Like, I don't know any couple that would go, well, we're 50-50 here, let's flip a coin, right? It's the man feels the responsibility. And listen, this should sound obvious, but if you're married to somebody who's willing to die for you, that's a pretty big deal. It's worth, and it's, by the way, it's in our DNA. Feminists will tell you, if you give a man respect, he'll squash you. Yes, he will, if he's a jerk. But if you married a basically good-hearted, basically mentally healthy man, if you give them respect, it only motivates them to love you more. And it's just in our DNA. What's the only place on earth men get unconditional respect? It's the only place on earth men get unconditional respect. The military. The military, you're respected because of the stripes on your arm, period. You get unconditional respect. And what are the two things men do in the military? They serve and they die. What the research shows is that when a man feels respected, he'll serve you and he'll die for you. Think about cruise ships, right? If you've ever been on a cruise, right? I've never been on a cruise. I've no desire to go on a cruise. It sounds like floating Alcatraz to me. Gets out there and you can't get off. It's just weird. Anyway, but on a cruise, they do fire drills. Like, or what if the boat's sinking? And what do they say? They get everybody on the deck, and what's the announcement say? Women and children first. How are the men feeling? Yes, we die, right? But the men, you'll never see women and children first. You'll never see, the most feminist person will never go, actually, we should draw straws and make it 50-50. No. It's like, no, the men have the responsibility to die. So what the research shows is not based on performance, but based on desire and based on the responsibility to lead, that when we verbalize that, men feel respected. If you go 2 slides forward for me, or 3 slides. Number 2, consistently and predictably initiate to meet the need for sexuality. Now, I want to be very, clinical right now. I don't want to be gross, but we're all adults. And so sex is one of these complicated things. And this is why anybody tries to make sex simple, they don't know what they're talking about. Sex has a lot of variables to it. And I'm not just talking about physical sex. I'm talking about how sex develops in somebody. I'm talking about chemicals. There are all kinds of variables in sexuality. There is age, there is health, there is blood pressure, there's diabetes, there is stressors, there are levels of testosterone, there are levels of estrogen, there are biases, there are past experiences, there are traumas, there are lots of things mixed up in sexuality. So I would just say this. The research shows that the couples who have the best sex life are the ones who don't notice it. That it's the cherry on top of this cake of support and love and compassion. And most importantly, the couples who report having the best sex lives are the ones who never use sex as a control mechanism to get their way, right? So they're not using it as a weapon. And what the reason, and this is so weird, because no woman has ever thought this in her life. No woman ever has thought, gee, he wants to have sex with me. That must mean he respects me. That doesn't cross their mind. But for some reason, when a woman initiates sexuality, the man thinks she believes in me. I know, strange. But that's what the research shows. And here's the thing. I'll say something that should be pretty obvious. If you're a married woman, you are the only legitimate sexual outlet your husband has. Correct? Like, think about it. If he tries to meet that legitimate need in an illegitimate way, how do you feel? You're the only legitimate outlet that your husband has. So what we can't say is have eyes only for me, but you can only have me when I say. Now, is that your right? Yes, it is. Is it your body? Yes. Is consent ultimately important? Yes. Is it your right to withhold until kingdom come? Yes, it is, but it's not the most profitable way to go. If you want your husband to feel respected and motivated to love, what the research shows is that when you take the role of initiator, he sees that as respect. I'm not going any further with that. We could go a long way with that, but I'll just leave it at that. The third one is this, and this is really, really important. Consistently and predictably verbalize your honor of his desire to work, achieve, and provide. In other words, assure him with your mouth that he's enough. What the research shows over and over and over again is that the biggest fear of a man is being seen as small. That could be literal size. It could be small bank account. It could be not important. The man's biggest fear is being seen as small. I'll close this out tonight by telling a story, and then we're going to ask 5 questions. It's one of the most moving stories I ever heard, and I happen to live in the area, and it's quite amazing, actually. So there was a pastor. He's an African-American pastor. He's humongous. And I don't mean like physically big. He was like had a church of 10,000. His name was E.V. Hill. And E.V. Hill and his wife were married 63 years. And I want you to think about that. Like, if you were married 63 years, how much stories would you have about your spouse, right? So, like, there's a lot of stories that build up over the years. He had 63 years worth, and his wife died before him. And he had to do his wife's funeral. Now think about this. You have 63 years of material built up in your head, and you have to choose 3 stories? 2 stories? Here's how he closed her eulogy. He said, now think about it, 63 years of material, and this was the story he chose to close her eulogy on. He said in that African, I am who I am. He said, I am who I am today because of the greatness of this woman. He said, let me tell you a story that tells you just how great she was. He said, when we were first married and starting out, he said, I was struggling, I was broke. He said, I was working 2 or 3 jobs. I was trying to get the church going, and she stood right by me. And he said, one day I came home, and he said he was doing some bricklaying job or whatever. Anyway, he was disgusting, like dirt all over him, just gross. And he came in and he looked up and she was setting the table to a candlelight dinner. And he said, I thought, oh, this is great. She's made a candlelight dinner for me, even though I'm all like this. He said, but I didn't want to go over there to her. I stunk and I was disgusting. He said, but so I at least wanted to wash my arms and hands before I went over and said hello, then I would take a shower. He said, so I walked into the bathroom and you know, when you're in your own house, you know where the light switch is. He said, I walked into the bathroom and shut the door, and he said, it took me 3 or 4 times to realize, oh no, she wasn't making a candlelight dinner. The lights had been turned off because I was too broke to pay the bill. So I washed my hands and arms, and I put the seat to the toilet down, and I just sat. He said, if I could have died in that toilet that day, I would have died. He said, I was so terrified to face her. What a loser. Like, what a loser. Who can't pay the electric bill? He said, I was so embarrassed, but I realized I couldn't sit in the toilet forever. At some point, I was going to have to face her. And he said, I just thought, well, I'll just face her. And he said, so I walked out. I couldn't even look up. I couldn't look her in the eyes. I was so embarrassed that I was too broke to pay the electric bill, and she was having to cook by candlelight. He said, I looked down, and I just owned it. He said, I figured the best thing to do is just to own it. He said, so I just owned it. I said, I'm so sorry. I'm doing my best, but I did not pay the electric bill because I didn't have it. And you're having to cook by candle. He said, I'm just so sorry. And he said her response in that moment, she could have destroyed me. She could have just made my life hell because I was a loser that day. But she didn't. He said she took my chin and lifted my head up. And she said, listen to me. I don't love anybody in this world more than you, and I don't believe in anybody in this world more than you. You are the man for me, and you have what it takes to win at life. We'll handle the electricity tomorrow, but tonight we dine by candlelight. And he said, in that moment, 60-something years ago, she saved my soul to believe in myself to do what I'm trying to do. And when he told that story, every man in the room was tearing up because it touched the soul of the deepest fear of all of us. And what the research shows is that if we can tell our husbands that they're enough, they feel respected. Now, I want to summarize this just with a few questions. Couple slides forward. How far are we willing to go to get off the crazy cycle? Like if you're finding yourself on this crazy cycle, without love, she responds without respect. How far are we willing to go? Number 2, who moves first? And the answer is the most mature one will tend to move first. Number 3, out of today's points, which is your weakest link? And are you willing to fix it? What 2 things could you implement this week to do so? That's between you and your spouse. But it's good to discuss these things. Number 4, if your son married a woman who treats him like you treat your husband, how would you feel? If your son married a woman like you, would you be happy for him? And if not, change. Because he's gonna. And it ain't because of Freud. It's because he thinks you're normal. If your son married a woman like you, if you're not happy for him, shift. Number 5, if your daughter married a man who treats her like you treat your wife, how would you feel? In other words, if your daughter married a man like you, if you wouldn't be thrilled about that, shift. Because here's the thing, she's gonna. And it's not because of Freud. It's because she thinks you're normal. If our sons and daughters married people like us, would we be happy for them? So, for you guys, empathy, reminiscing, and full circle conflict. For the ladies, the honor of the responsibility to lead the home. Be the initiators of sexuality. And assure him above all things with your mouth that you believe he's enough. What the research shows is that good-hearted men will feel respected, good-hearted women will feel loved, and according to the Apostle Paul, that's the key to a happy family. Thanks for letting me share. I hope Jesus got bigger, the cross worked better, the resurrection is central, and scriptures got bigger, not smaller. I just looked down and realized I went a little over the time I said, but it's because you were laughing at my jokes. So we just kept going. Grace and peace, everybody.
Thank you, Shane. Well, you're welcome to grab some, stick around. We'll put on some music. You're welcome to chat to your partner, your spouse, or anyone else at the table, obviously, and help yourself to Shane's resources. So grab his resource if you want them. Welcome to stick around. Thanks for joining us tonight. How do I pray over you? Lord, thank you for great information, Lord. I pray that you will empower every person here to have a greater, stronger marriage relationship In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. God bless.
When sorrow comes to steal the joy I own, when brokenness and pain is all I know, I won't be shaken. No, I won't be shaken. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your